as the coronavirus pandemic continuously takes its toll on the world population, all governments across the globe are taking last-minute measures to curb its further spread. Here in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari on Sunday declared a total lockdown in 2 states of the Federation. It was actually, well, three actually, Lagos, Ogun and Abuja, which is the Federal Capital Territory. There have since been many questions raised, as well as many answers. So joining us in the studio this morning to share his own perspective on the total lockdown is a journalist and political analyst, Adeniyi Kunnu. Good morning, Adeniyi. Thank you so much for joining us again. If we were to start with President Muhammadu Buhari, his declaration, were you expecting, personally yourself, were you expecting him to announce the lockdown in those 3 states?
Yeah, I couldn't pick your words, but if logic serves me right, I know you're talking about the impact of the COVID-19. Of course, as declared by the president days ago on the Federal Capital Territory, Lagos and Ogun State. I have to say, it's been back and forth. In the first place, let us look at the implication of actually getting locked down at a place. You're talking about people who, before that time, had means of livelihood, which, of course, has been the argument regarding what many people are complaining about, that for you to actually keep people at a particular place, then certain kind of palliatives should be in place, which I completely support. You know, many people have alluded to South Africa as a country where, yes, the lockdown is hailed. But one of the misfortunes of South Africa's lockdown is synonymous to Nigeria's lockdown, which is the fact that nothing is provided for people except, of course, for what we've heard. And one of the things that shocked me, in the first place, let's say this. On the one hand, the president should be commended for saying that, okay, the poorest of the poor will be considered. And of course, certain payments have started. But for me, my worry or concern is if at the beginning of the administration of the president, we had about, let me say, 20% of the Nigerian people who are unemployed, and before the election that brought him in for a second term, we have about 23% of Nigerians who are unemployed. One of the faults, of the particular faults, I should say, of this initiative of giving money to those who have been on the social welfare program of the government before is it did not take cognizance of the new people that as a result of this particular pandemic, don't forget that we're talking about the global village here. There are certain people's jobs in this country that are guaranteed by some cruise ship in faraway Aruba in the Caribbean islands. So I think that one of the things that has indeed affected many people with respect to this is the fact that many people cannot take care of themselves or their families any longer, which is where I said that having initially conducted some feasibility studies before you got the names of those you're giving certain amounts of money every month to support their income, then what study was conducted to ensure that the new set of people who have become unemployed as a result of this pandemic are given consideration to? That's another part. Then at the same time, we're talking about the people now. I know that everybody must survive. One way or the other, people are losing money. I think that one of the things people should also know is the fact that those who have been told to stay home, that at times hunger wouldn't kill you, but foolishness can actually take your life. Lagos, as of now, has the highest number of cases, well over what is found in any other part of the country. It therefore means that on the one hand, when we are making advocacy for people so that government can reconsider the kind of package they're giving to those who really have been affected, people must also listen that the jeopardy in exposing themselves at this time cannot actually be quantified. A situation where in a country, the likes of the president can't go nowhere because obviously he has to be here at home to see to these issues. What about those who do not have access to such health care? So I think that these will be my opening here to the question you asked me, if I heard it correctly.
Yeah, and let's even talk about the economic implications for the 3 states that have been put on lockdown, especially Lagos, that accounts for 80% of trade in Nigeria and 50% of Nigeria's GDP. What do you think the implications are? Because when you say people should go on lockdown in a city with a population of 20 million and still counting, what are the implications of this? Both for...
Okay. All right. The first thing is it has exposed the incompetence of Nigerian government. Please, not the Buhari administration alone. The incompetence of Nigerian government at the federal level. Now, for the past 4, 5, 6 years, especially with this administration, of course, the Buhari administration has been hit hard by that. We've been talking about opening up other seaports. Now, at times when you think that you're doing something for your own reason and it's affecting certain people in certain parts of the country, you wouldn't know when it's going to come to bite you. Give me one reason why up until this moment, the only port that is very functional is the Lagos port. We've got ports in Rivers, we've got ports in Delta State, we've got ports in, of course, Akwa Ibom. Why is it that in the Niger Delta region, where you have most of the brackish water, where you have the crude, where you have opportunities to bring in very, very heavy goods, those areas have not been attended to over the years? If you're looking at it now, Lagos is on lockdown, Ogun State is on lockdown. Of course, they talked about allowing port operations to go. But you forget that some of these areas that have been locked down don't do businesses independently of themselves. They have some connection with other areas in the country. So while you have been serving the Lagos people over time, and of course, which is positive on my own, is there any justified reason for locking down even the southeast waterways? We know what kind of goods come into this country that goes to that part of the country. So I have to say first that one of the things we have come to is an eye-opener for the government of Nigeria. I reiterate this here, that I'm not just talking about this administration in power. I'm talking about the previous administration, especially the Fourth Republic. If God and, of course, all of the positives has allowed us to come into a democracy again in 1999, why are we still basking in the negatives of the past and not allowing the fluidity that is expected of a federated system become operational? Let's say this now. We've been talking about getting back to understanding how we can indeed be a federated system. People have been talking about having the countries in different parts so that people can do their own and bring that to bear. But if you look at it, at this point, the fact that more still goes to the center is affecting the respective part of the country. If Nigeria is operating a truly federated system, the country will not be on total lockdown, and even the federal government would have been eased of the burden, because monies or certain honorarium that come from the respective state would have gone to the federal government, and states would have been able to better manage it. But when things go and always come from the center, it is just the problem, and now it is becoming very obvious. Lagos, for instance, that has accounted for a lot, is also affected. So these are also part of the issues now.
So what you're saying, in effect, is that Nigeria may be paying a very, very costly price for not, listening to those who've been calling for true federation all this while. And in essence, when it comes to the fight against COVID-19, are you saying that the states really should be at the forefront of this fight in taking decisions like locking down the cities and what have you, and not from the federal government?
Excuse me, I have to say this, but for the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I have to say here that every state that has recorded the incidence of the COVID-19, the respective first citizens of this state, let me take Lagos for instance now, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, understands, you can't question that, he understands the nooks and crannies of Lagos, the borders of Lagos, than the president, even than the vice president, because updates comes to him every time on what is happening at different corners. The federal government can actually add or lend its support, as we've seen in the past days. But I tell you, if you do a comparison of what has been happening in Lagos and what has been happening at the center, I have to say that Lagos has a better grasp of it. Excuse me, people should just take politics off this. because even while many persons were clamoring to know where their president was, the governor of Lagos State continues to address people on a daily basis. Such is the demands of leadership. You have to be able to tell people that I am here for you. For instance, let's look at the home front. There are some homes headed by fathers, and there are some homes where maybe the fathers are no more there, the mothers take the lead. In times of crisis, the consistent communication and consistent explanation to the people under your household go a long way to give them hope. So that simply means even the landlord of a home or your neighbor cannot understand what happens under your roof than yourself because you live there. It is the same particular example that I've drawn here. The respective states should take the lead in the fight against COVID-19. Let me tell you this. NCDC is in Abuja, for instance. All ministers are in Abuja. If anything happens in Lagos, the respective commissioners would have to brief the governors first. The governors then will transmit the information to the center before it is collated. Except, of course, you're talking about the agencies of government who have offices in respective states of the federation and could do certain things. But don't forget, certain official communication do not leave respective states until it has been sanctioned by the governor. So that simply means every information in respective states, first of all, come to the table of the world's first citizens in the state before it is transmitted to the federal government. And I'm saying this here, that we have to ensure that in these times, we don't shoot ourselves in the eyes because we have shot ourselves already in the foot. So that means we are not working as we should. So if the bullet comes to our eyes now as a nation, then we won't be able to see. So in playing politics, there are certain things to take away from it. Okay, just let's look at what is happening now. Where is the opportunity to go abroad to check if you have a headache? We're talking about lockdown. Everybody's here. So that simply means if there's any deaths that will kill everybody, everybody goes down because of the cumulative irresponsibility of government over time. I say again, not just this administration. So at times when we play politics foolishly, foolishness actually can engulf everybody as an inferno and consume people. And that is what's happening here. So people should leave politics aside. Let the respective governors in each state of the federation take the lead in this fight because they understand better what is happening. Tell me, how much does the vice president understand at the Ilaje communities in Lagos? How much, again, does the president understand about the creeks in and around Lagos? For instance, there's a place called Snake Island here. I do not think the president has ever been there, and there are Nigerians living there. So let's say this as it is, the states should take the lead. They should, of course, share information with the federal government, but the states must take the lead.
You do make a very, very interesting points, quite a number of them. Then there is the issue of legality. Maybe when we come back from this break, but just touch on it first before we go on that break. The legality of the lockdown has been put into question. People like respected Wole Soyinka, Falano, and the rest of them have been questioning and saying that the government is not constitutionally empowered to lock down any part of the country.
Let's say this. I respect the opinions of thought leaders in this country. I respect their opinion. But I also have to say that in instances of emergency, there are certain things to expect the leadership of the country to do to, first of all, mitigate anything that could destroy our lives. While the thought leaders and opinion leaders and the likes of Wole Soyinka and Falano are correct, I also say that it's a welcome development for the president to have announced this lockdown. But as I said at the opening of this conversation, you cannot lock down states of the country without providing certain things to cushion the impact of what is wrong with it. For instance, we hear the...
Okay.
Yeah, so
let's put you on break, Mr. Adeniyi Kunnu. When we return, we'll discuss even further on the implications of COVID-19 lockdown in Nigeria. Stay with us. Right, you're welcome back. This is the morning show. We've been talking with Adeniyi Kunnu, a political analyst and a journalist, on the implications of the lockdown, which was announced last week by the president. And you were making a point, Adeniyi Kunnu, on the legality of the lockdown. That is a very, very serious issue now.
Very serious issue. I've actually read very informed papers, many informed papers from people who really have been making a point that we cannot put aside. They talked about the fact that the president doesn't have, there are lots of references made to the Constitution, the likes of Evans Ufeli, GT Ogun, and as you mentioned, Femi Falano and Wole Soyinka, they've actually lent their voice to it. But I want to really appeal to them that the law is right. But even in jurisprudence, there are certain things that you have to put together. Even in any legal engagements, there are certain considerations you must make. So I have to say that where the federal government got it wrong, for me, was to have just announced and expected people, more or less like 48 hours after or 24 hours after, that certain states of the federation would be on lockdown. I think that is one thing that the federal government should have reconsidered with respect to what it gives to the people. And if you also look at it, the way the position of the federal government has been received with respect to the monies disbursed within the short period of time, and the manner in which the money was disbursed has also come into the fray. And if you look at it, it all has to do with how the whole information and relationship with the people have gone. So you're talking about a government locking down the state that accounts for 50% of what comes to our coffers. For instance, you're talking about some states in the north. I tell you, if this continues, certain states will be completely paralyzed, because what comes in from Lagos in terms of taxes and other forms of revenue really has gone to help the federal government itself. Then you're talking about a state that has close to about $1 trillion budget. Lagos, that happens to be the first. $1 billion rather, or in this case, sorry, $1 trillion. You're talking about Lagos that has accounted for a whole lot in terms of what is spent and in terms of what it gives. So I must say here that next time, and for many state governors themselves, this is a point to learn. The reason I've said this is very clear. Now, oftentimes I wanted to talk about the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, that every year it will announce that there will be rainfall in certain parts of the country, there will be flooding, that people should move away from where they've lived, that they should go to other places so they can be safe. How can you tell the people in the country, I'm just alluding to that, to buttress my point, that how can you tell people to move to higher lands where you, government, that has a responsibility to protect their lives, wouldn't provide temporary shelters? You know that this is something that is perennial. So now I'm coming back to the issue of how the states were locked down without federal government considering a lot of things. And if you look at it, I also think that a lot of anomalies exist in the communication of the federal government in respect of telling them that, all right, you people are on lockdown and nothing is happening. Then before you know what's happening, government announced that they are going to start giving certain people whose names are already there certain money. So I think that government should try as much as possible and win the trust of people. We know of a fact that not every citizen of the country can actually be provided for in these difficult times. But when you try to comfort as somebody that can be trusted, then people wouldn't react the way they've reacted. In fact, there are certain opinion leaders who would have written in their favor and said, although government took this decision, it wasn't proper, but of course we know that government has made certain provision so that they can cushion the impact of this particular challenge that everybody the world over is facing. So I must say here, visit the palliatives that it says is given to people. Don't forget, Lagos is still on lockdown. We've not even used a week. Then we're talking about the second week. That simply means as the day goes ahead, I'm telling you, it's going to be more difficult for Nigerians, it's going to be more difficult for Lagosians, it's going to be more difficult for these states that have been locked down. And you never can tell. If you do a comparison of the numbers of those that have been infected by COVID-19 as of when the lockdown was declared, and of course you do a comparison of that figure by the end of 2 weeks, I can tell you for free, you would have an increase in the number. Not being negative, but being realistic. Because even when this lockdown is on, many people are violating it. Some people are just moving here and there. And even the way they make contact with one another is another thing. So I believe very strongly that government must review the so-called palliative, so-called in quotes, that it is given to the people, and try to review, recheck the numbers, and really be careful, because let us not sit on a keg of gunpowder. When people are hungry for too long, when people cannot take care of their loved one for too long, other thoughts come in, and that's not good for any one of us in the country.
Absolutely. Adeniyi, let's discuss some of those violations that you were speaking of with regards to the lockdown. Now, a case happened, an incident happened within the last 48 hours, 72 hours, I believe, in Warri, Delta State, whereby a Nigerian army officer gunned down a man who was going to procure medicine for his pregnant wife. And the Nigerian army officer stated that the guy flouted the lockdown laws, if you will. Well, they can't be laws because they haven't been written into legislation, but you get my drift. Now, It's interesting to note that the Nigerian Army's response, first and foremost, Delta is not one of the states that was mentioned by the president that had to be under lockdown. It's not Lagos State, it's not Ogun State, and it's not the FCT, Abuja. So why are we seeing instances of killings now taking place as a result of these lockdowns?
On my way to your office, I actually was stopped. I was stopped on. I actually had to stop at different points where you have police officers, and I, in a civilized manner, communicated my position, communicated my role here, and what I was going around to do, and they allowed me. I think that one thing people must understand, I'm talking about Nigerians now, before I come to the army, one thing people must understand is when there is an instruction or a guideline or a particular position held by government, I think the first thing we should try and do to save lives is to listen. That is one thing, because the one who is dead now cannot make a case or actually go to court. He is dead and he is dead. And if I tell you this, that is one of the problems people have been having even in Lagos here. You'd find that people who do not have businesses moving about, who are not amongst those exempted, just want to leave their homes in complete disregard. Now, let's say this. If, for instance, I keep to all the rules given by the Center for Disease Control to safeguard myself and my family from this pandemic, what is the surety that the next man has not exposed himself or herself? So I'm talking to the people now. The guidelines is for you, for everybody to first of all be safe, because you never can tell, you could be infected, and in the course of walking through the security checkpoints, you expose other people. So I think people should understand that part first. Then secondly, I think a lot of these security operatives, a lot of our security operatives must actually understand and be sensitized properly. I've discussed with some police officers. Some of them don't have a grasp of those exempted. That in the course of my work, I've had to stop at some point and, of course, maintain the 3 feet to tell them, Oga, this person is exempted, that person is exempted. And they've actually been polite enough to accept the fact that they don't have a total grasp of those. So for those officers that killed that young man, I think what's important for them, which I know that authorities that are watching now should listen to, is try as much as possible to engage with those that you have saddled with the responsibility of protecting lives and preventing movement at this period. Because at the officer who killed this young man being properly informed, it would not have gone the way it went. Because if you are going to get medicines for some people, the person should know that even those who are involved in the medical practice, which relate to certain pharmaceutical attendants, as it were, they are exempted because they make provision for those who are sick at this point. But for the ordinary citizen who wants to get something, I think communicating that concern to that person would have been better than for you to have gone the way you did. And if you look at it, the reprisals have been very terrible.
Yes.
Because I saw and I tell you this, every Nigerian should also understand that it is the height of criminality that could make you go and spend the rest of your lives in jail if you attack somebody who is on duty. In the same worry, I saw people hitting security operatives that are supposed to protect lives and property with dangerous weapons. How can you get to that level? How could you? And I tell you, anytime you attack security operatives that way, these people are taught to do one thing, to kill. How do you expect them to overlook such things that you have done? And I'm afraid for the coming days, because one person is dead, security operatives have been attacked. How could the defenseless victims or the defenseless citizens do that? So I tell you, on both sides, we've got a lot of things to address. And it all boils down to when you communicated the information, the manner or the presentation of the information, and how you came across as being very true. Now, let's say this, please, before you switch to the next level. Before the president announced that states would be on lockdown, the president had kept quiet. So you cannot look at things in isolation. Nobody demanded that Babajide Sanwo-Olu talk to Lagosians. He has been doing that of his own accord. So his communication, his approach has been accepted. Daily briefings on television. The federal government should learn to take the lead. After all, the federal government takes more of the money that comes into the coffers of Nigeria. So why do we always have, if you look at it, it becomes so painful that a certain Imam of Peace who lives in Australia, was saying Buhari resign. I think that that is actually something that we shouldn't really be having before my own president addressed Nigerians. These are very factual issues. So when the president eventually appeared, there were lots of rumors that have been bandied around. So if you look at it, trust has been destroyed. Belief has been shattered. Faith has been made useless as of the time the president eventually came out to talk. And when he talked, he did not even, there was no room for question. Babajide Sanwo-Olu takes question. I'm saying that there are ways you talk about issues.
Yeah.
I keep saying these things. In this age and time, we need the president. The president is educated, for God's sake. So we're not talking about a president that's not educated. And the president before now, we know him to be somebody who can talk to people. So why are they preventing my president from speaking to the people that gave him their mandate? A president may not know everything. That is why he has ministers. We see Donald Trump, he doesn't know everything. At times Fauci speaks, at times another person speaks.
It depends on who you ask, Adeniyi. I'm sure if you asked Donald Trump if he knew everything, his answer would be yes.